Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to another mod with me, where we craft a creative connection to the decks in my collection. So today we are going to be trimming and edging my new Oracle of the Dragonfae. Now, I really love these backs. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. I like the purple border with the gold inlay on the back of this deck. I think it's stunning. However, I'm not like a huge fan of these beige borders. There is a bit of a design to them, but I don't know. I just feel like it kind of washes out the deck. And particularly when we have cards like this where the color tone is kind of the same, I just feel like it really washes the images out. And I feel like this is a deck that would have been much more powerful, and the artwork would be able to really be expressive and really be more dynamic if it wasn't contained by these beige borders. And honestly, I think like any other color would have been better than beige. Maybe the purple gold color that they have going on the back of the cards might have been a better choice, but from my own perspective, I feel like the beige borders really don't do anything to help this deck out. And I feel like for a lot of the cards, it kind of washes the image out. And so I thought, well, since I'm not a fan and all of the important card information will still be maintained in the area that I have left, I will, however, be losing the numbers. So while that's not like a huge deal, it might make jumping in and out of the guidebook a little bit more difficult because I'm not going to be able to use the numbers to check the guidebook. However, I don't tend to use the guidebook a lot with Oracle decks. And for this particular one, the cards aren't in alphabetical order. So when I chop those numbers off, it might make it a bit more difficult to find them because I'm not going to be able to like look alphabetically to find the card that I'm looking for. However, there's only 43, so this isn't a super long list. So I really don't feel like it's going to be that big of a deal if I chop the borders off and take the numbers off. If it does end up being a big deal, I can always just take some marker and write the numbers maybe really small down in one of these corners. But I feel like overall this is a good candidate for a trim. It is a larger size deck, and if you've seen some of my other videos where I'm working with Oracle decks or just really large tarot, I have a hard time getting my hands around larger decks. And so I tend to prefer them to be smaller anyway. This deck is on that beautiful new Blue Angel cardstock, which is absolutely fantastic. But again, I feel like the whole aesthetic of this deck was kind of washed out by these beige borders. So even though we have these gorgeous images, we have this glorious cardstock, I feel like these beige borders really just do a disservice to this deck. I feel like being that this is the Oracle of the Dragonfae and the fact that we have really powerful images in this deck, I feel like the artwork should be allowed to breathe its fullest, kind of explode out of the card, and I feel like they're being really constrained by these borders. Again, had they been black or dark purple or gold or probably any other color than beige, it might have worked a little bit better. I get that beige is a good kind of neutral color that works with a lot of different color palettes, and being that we have multiple artists on this deck, you know, that's probably something that they did keep in mind, but I feel like the beige just really washes out these cards and really constrains the artwork. So I'm going to take those borders off today and re-edge the deck. I have no idea what color I'm going to edge this deck in yet. We'll just have to see how that goes. And yeah, I think it's going to really allow the artwork, as we often say, to really breathe and really open up these cards. But for this deck in particular, I feel like it's going to kind of release the power within these images because they feel very boxed in. Like somebody took these powerful images and archetypes and energies and put them in a box and just like shut the lid. And so I feel like by taking off the borders, I'm going to be like opening up that box and letting the cards breathe and letting the energy flow outward from these cards. So that's the plan for today. Hopefully all goes as planned. So let's go ahead, clear the table, make some space and jump in. I do always like to go over my tools. Today we're just going to be using my standard Fiskars trimmer. I have my corner rounder for when we're done. I have my handy triangle ruler that I use to create a guide, my washi tape to hold that down, and look, this time I remembered to include my ruler in my tools I'm going to be using, which I use to kind of help me get a better guide or a better idea of where the blade's going to come down, because with this clear plastic guide over the top, sometimes it can be hard to see. One of the things I always do first before I start any mod is I go through the deck and I look for the most challenging card. Now, often that is when I'm taking off borders, that usually has to do with things like the text. Like I want to make sure I'm not cutting off any text that I don't mean to cut off. And so it does look like I've gone through this. It does look like for the most part, the text is all pretty close to the same area. So as long as the sides are totally fine, because none of the text extends past the artwork area into the border, what I'm just going to need to be sure and watch out for is the text down here at the bottom, the little key phrase at the bottom or keyword, and just make sure that I'm not getting so close to that I'm taking it off, because I would like to keep that, because a lot of these people, characters, archetypes, I don't know who they are, so the key phrase really does help me. So I want to make sure that I'm, just cutting off just as much as I need on the bottom and not cutting into those words. So the first thing that I'm going to do is trim the deck, and I'm going to start with the hardest part first, the most challenging part first, because if for some reason I totally screw this up, then there's no point in me continuing, right? So I am going to hopefully very carefully, I take that back because I do have this issue with this trimmer where it's only a 5-inch wide trimmer. So if my cards are larger than 5 inches, it makes it really hard for me to use my guide over here, and I have to kind of do some wonky things with it. So if I were to take off the top first, where I'm not as concerned about, trying to maintain anything up here, that would make it a little bit smaller and would ensure that I'm able to use some better positioning to go to the bottom. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm just gonna try to make it smaller first. That's what I'm going for. I'm gonna try to make it smaller. So I am going to try to kind of figure out where I want this to be, and I could even go a little bit closer in. I don't want to accidentally cut her head off. Now I'm just kind of going through and looking what am I going to get cutting into, if there's anything super important like right up next to the top. And I mean, a couple of their heads are kind of close, like her head's kind of close. This card throws me because it's the same card that's on the back. I'm going to go ahead and trim it, but I might actually remove it from the deck. Just because I really don't like when they do that, when they use like one of the images from the front of the card on the back of the card. Like, just create a different design. Anyway, I know that's me being super nitpicky. So if I trim the top off here, to be like roughly here, I'm just kind of looking to see like if I'm going to be cutting off anything super important, and I don't think I am. Let's start with that card that I might not include in the deck. That way, if I mess it up, then it's okay. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is figure out where I want this and tape it down. And as per usual, I totally forgot to get my washi tape out. I like to just kind of pull a few pieces off, and I just stick it to the edge of my deck so that it's easy and at hand. So you can see here when I am at this very, very edge, it's like almost impossible for me to tape this down because there's a lip here. There's like a ledge. And so it doesn't lay flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to eyeball the top for the most part. And then when I go flip it around to cut the bottom, and I use a really straight guide, that is what will help me get it straighter than if I were just eyeballing it. So what I'm going to do is kind of just put a piece of washi tape right here. And again, I'm not trying to get this like super perfect because I can fix any issues when I flip it around. So technically I should be able to just kind of slide my card in here and go, yep, it's kind of right about there, and we're going to cut. So you can see there that I got all of the back border off and the front border along with just a little extra. So because I'm kind of eyeballing this, it's not gonna be like 100% perfect, but like I said, when I go to flip the deck around, hopefully that will fix it. Let's see how I did. I mean, those are pretty close, so maybe, you know, I might do okay with this. So I'm gonna cut the top off and then we'll come back and check and I'll show you what I'm gonna do at the bottom. Okay, so I trimmed the top off. It took, I don't know, 5 minutes maybe. This one, that first one I did, I feel like I didn't quite get it. Yeah, it wasn't quite as short as the other ones. That's kind of funny. Okay, so they do feel like I did a fairly decent job, being that I was eyeballing it. This one feels a bit bigger too. I mean, not that it really matters because I'm going to trim the other side, but as straight as I can get it on, you know, this first round is always helpful. Okay, that feels better. So that's the tops taken off. Love that when you can see all the colors. So what I'm gonna do now, the hope is that now that I've got them down a little bit smaller, I can go ahead and get a better, space to get my ruler in there. And I'm always trying to be very careful not to get my washi in the way of my ruler. I need to stop shifting it. See, it's really hard when you get to this end as I shift it around like 3-4 times. And to be perfectly honest, if I wasn't trying to do this on camera, this whole process goes so much faster when I'm not doing a mod with me. I love doing the mod with me's. I hope you all enjoy them, but it does make the process take like 3 times as long as it normally does. I can mod a deck much faster when I'm not kind of worrying about the camera and the angles and the lighting and, you know, when I'm just in here doing my thing. Now I want to make sure that it's actually going to be like pretty straight. It looks straight. Alrighty. It looks straight. We're doing it. There it goes. You see, I know I have no fear when it comes to chopping things off my deck. I'm just gonna go for it. But there we go. I have managed to save the titles down at the bottom, and like I can get my hands around it now. That's awesome too. So I got the back side off and the front side off. And again, kind of sad to be losing that purple color, but I don't know. I might put it back in the edging. Maybe that's what we'll do. I mean, it's really close to those title or those keywords down at the bottom, but it's not interfering with them. And I'm okay with it being close as long as I don't lose them. I just don't want to cut them off because I do need them with this deck. Okay, through the magic of video, it's now been 2 days for me since I trimmed this deck, and just a moment for you. So I ended up finishing the trim, rounding the corners, and this is what the backs ended up looking like, which actually I think are quite beautiful. The card that features the same imagery, like it's a little bit weird. And like, as I mentioned, I may remove that from the deck. I think I mentioned that. Again, it's been 2 days. I think it came out beautiful. I mean, look at how vibrant and open and expansive these images are. See, this is just a little bit weird. After I got the deck trimmed, I was playing with some different colors, and I decided I really, really wanted this purpley color. right? And I may do some gold overlay over it or something, but I really wanted this purpley color on the sides because I really do like it. I think it just, you know, it matches the book, it matches the deck, and I really wanted to incorporate that back in here because sadly they had to come off. I wish it had been this way. Like that would have worked, right? Put those ugly beige borders on the back. Anyway, I really wanted to incorporate that color back in, and I did not have anything. I went through all my markers, all my stamps, and I had nothing that was even close to that color. So what I ended up doing is going to the store, and I'm gonna just pull some scrap paper here so that I could find hopefully a color that would be close. And actually, I bought a bunch of markers. So I've never been one to use Tombows for edging decks because I use Tombows in my journaling. And when you edge a deck with a marker, it pretty much eats the marker up. It creates like ridges in it. I don't know if it'll show up, but here's a deck that I did, or a marker that I've used. I probably won't show up, but if I mark on a, see where that white is? That is because there's a groove in the marker from where I have run it over and over and over the edge of decks. So I tend to keep my deck edging markers separate, and I went through all my Crayolas and there just really wasn't a color that was even remotely close. So I decided, after watching some videos from Kelly, The Truth and Story, I always watch her videos, and she was edging a deck using Tombows, and she had mentioned how she pretty much always uses Tombows. And I thought, you know what, I'm ready to give that a try, but I need to get separate Tombows because I don't want to use my journaling markers on my decks. So I got a couple colors because I had a couple of different decks in mind for edging. And I decided to just go ahead and get colors for each one. So I got a whole handful of Tombows for edging decks, and I will keep them separate as the deck, as the markers for edging. So I think this is the one, yes. This was the Tombow 679. And I think this, out of all the ones that I tried at the store, came the closest. Now granted, it's gonna look a little bit different on the card than it does here, but I think if I wanna darken it up, I can keep going over it. So the more layers I add, the deeper it's gonna get. So 2 layers is actually really closer to what I wanted. So that's what I did, and then life happened. And so here we are, now coming back to this project to finish it up. I do have a couple of the edges that I cut off just to double check and try this, because I have not used Tombows on my decks before, and I want to make sure that they're not gonna like bleed horribly, although I know Kelly uses them on her decks and she says they don't bleed. I don't see any bleed. Let's get a really light one. So that looks pretty good. I'm not seeing a whole lot of bleeding, if any. Here's a nice, like, I don't even know if I need to wipe it off. I don't think Kelly does. I'm like, whatever Kelly does, Dawn does. Let's just be honest, because I love Kelly. Anyway, that was my adventure. I had to basically kind of stop in the middle of this mod and go get the proper color, because that's just super important. So now I'm basically gonna go through and finally finish up this deck. I'm going to do a test on that one card that I said I was probably going to remove because it's the exact same image that's on the back. Anyway, we're gonna try it with this one, because if this one bleeds horribly, I'm okay with that. So I'm just gonna, I think, probably do 2 passes, and hopefully I'll get that richer color that I'm after. And I don't know, because I'm me, I am going to wipe it off because that's just what I do. And I got a little bit off on the paper towel, but not much. So I can see a little bit of bleeding, but it is very minute. I don't know if you can even see it. Like there's just a little bit, but again, because I'm edging into a raw edge, not a finished edge. That's a pretty cool color. I think I'm good with that. I'm going to finish edging the deck. Maybe actually I'll do half and we'll check back in so we can see what it looks like. Okay, so I've got about half the deck edged. I just finished edging that last card and I'm not really seem to be getting a whole lot of transfer on my hands, which is quite fantastic. But let's see what we think of this color and how it came out. I can see a couple places where I missed. Okay, so here's the color that is coming out. It should be pretty true. It's a little bit lighter than this. So I may actually do a second coat just to try and darken it up. We'll see if that works, but I do really like the color. I think it's gonna be really cool on here. Here's the, you know, edged, and then, you know, the unedged. So definitely a huge difference here with the purple on there. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish edging the deck, and then maybe I'll come back and do a second coat on these ones and we'll see if it makes any sort of a difference. So this was the first stack that I did, and I've gone back and put a second coat on it, and I thought maybe I'm gonna turn them this way because then maybe I'll be able to make sure I get them divided back up again. And I wanted to see if it made a difference. And it does slightly. There is a slight difference. I don't know if it'll pick up on camera or not, but I definitely like having it just to be a little bit darker. I also feel like it filled in a little bit better. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and do a second coat on the rest of these. So I may just leave it as the purple. So we'll see when I get done with the second coat on these cards. I'm on the last card here of doing a second layer. My fingers are quite purple. Look at that. There's all over my hand too. So this is much messier. I'm finding much messier than stamps are, but the color is beautiful and it's going on really easy. The one thing I am finding, and why I wanted to kind of just turn the camera back on real quick, is that the more I do this and the deeper the grooves get in my marker, the more bleed I'm getting wrapping around the back of the card. So I just wanted to kind of show you real quick how I'm dealing with that, because if you've watched my other mods, you know nothing irritates me more than to have a micro border put back on after I have trimmed a border off. I don't know if it will show up on camera, but there is definitely a micro border on this now because I've worn grooves into this marker is really what it is. So after I have edged every card, what I've been doing is kind of just taking my little paper towel, and I found that going this way, so I'm pulling the ink outward into the paper towel and not smearing it across the card, is really helpful. So I kind of give it a little wipe down like that. That gets rid of the majority of it, but I also found that if I just lay it flat and I just run the paper towel along the edge, it comes right off. And I could probably do it on the front, but I'm not really noticing a ton of bleed on the front. It definitely seems to be more geared toward the back, and that's because I kept the back angled to me. Let's see if it will do it on these ones that have been sitting. Now see, these ones don't have near as much bleed on them because the marker wasn't quite as grooved. I mean, it may work a little bit. I may have gotten a little bit more off. Do I really need to sit here and do this with all of them? Probably not. Am I going to probably sit here and do this with all of them? Probably so. So I'm just gonna real quick give these ones a wipe down just on the back because I feel like that's really where the bleeding is coming from. But I just wanted to pop on and share that because I did notice, as per usual with any sort of marker or stamp that you're using, the more you use it, the deeper the grooves get, and then it basically creates a cavern that kind of ends up, the card slips into it, and then that means the other side of the little groove is wrapping around the cards. And so I just wanted to share that just in case. Again, this is my first time using Tombow, so I always like to be really clear with my experiences. I do really love the selection of colors. It's really easy to go on. Short of that kind of grooving effect that I'm getting with the, now that I've gone through the deck twice. But again, perfectly natural. That happens with every marker or stamp that I use. That's just going to be the thing that happens. I do feel like I am, getting these a little bit cleaner than they were before. And they have been sitting for roughly 20 minutes or so. Maybe not quite, but I feel like, yeah, about 20 minutes since I've touched these ones. So this ink has been sitting for about 20 minutes. Now, I don't know if it's really coming off, and granted, it's the backs, so I should probably be looking more at the fronts. But again, because I hold the backs towards me, when I do get wraparound, it ends up being in the back. Yeah, so there was some that I was totally able to wipe off. Now, of course, this also totally depends on the cardstock that you're working with. This is that beautiful matte Blue Angel cardstock. And yeah, I'm able to just really get all that excess off, so that makes me happy. With this Blue Angel matte cardstock, I do believe this is the first deck that I've modded using this cardstock as well, so that's always interesting too. So I'm going to finish cleaning these up and being, super OCD with it, but that is what I do. And then we'll take a look at the finished deck, because I've decided not to put any gold on it because I really don't want to take away from the purple, because I really do like that purple color. I think it looks really, really good with this deck. Okay, so I have finished the entire mod. I have washed my hands, but they are still quite purple. I definitely won't be doing any more videos today. And I really love the way that it turned out. So I took those big borders off. We had that pretty purple border that I did actually like on the back that kind of matched this here. And again, I used the Tombow 679 to try to get a fairly close match to that color that was on there originally. So here's what the edges ended up looking like, which I think look really cool. And here is the deck completely borderless. It is so much more open now. It feels like the energy is allowed to expand outward. And again, if the borders hadn't been beige, maybe it'd have been better, but I feel like the beige borders just really washed out this beautiful artwork and really contained the energy of the cards. And now I think they just look really beautiful. I love a nice borderless deck. It ended up working out really well because all the titles are in the artwork area. So I was able to just remove the borders and maintain all the titles and keywords, which is really fantastic. We'll just do a quick flip through because there's not a ton of cards, and that way you can see them all, because they are quite powerful now. Very beautiful, much more energetic. They feel much more alive and vibrant, and the energy just really radiates. It really does open up the artwork, and I know we say that a lot when we trim borders off decks, but I think in decks like these, where they are very energetic decks anyway, and the artwork is meant to be quite energetic, that when you box it in with the border, you're just kind of trying to contain all of that you've created now. So let's see in terms of the size. And I do have another Blue Angel deck here. They were the same size. They're not the same cardstock, but they were the same size. So you can see here that they are quite a bit smaller now, which is fantastic for me. I think that border is about 1/4 of an inch. So you can see it made a big difference in the size of the deck overall, which for me is great because these Oracle decks with, these giant cards and these big borders tend to be really hard for me to use. And so I love when they come out being like more of the perfect size for me once I trim them. So let's go ahead and give it a shuffle. I do think it's probably fairly dry at this point, even though I did just finish edging it. I feel like the Tombow does dry pretty quick. And it does still shuffle beautifully because, again, when you're trimming, if you make sure that your cards come out really even, then you have a much better shuffle. I've had a few decks that prior to using my little triangle ruler and using kind of, I always say measurements, but I don't actually measure, right? I don't go, I'm gonna cut 3/4 of an inch off this deck. I just go, I'm gonna chop it right about here, and I'm going to use the guard to make sure that I chop every card on that side at the same place. And that's what allows me to get this really straight, even trim, and they do shuffle beautifully when they're nicely cut. The decks that I've either cut by hand or that I cut prior to using my little triangle method, my little ruler method, they don't shuffle near as well. Now, some of that can be cardstock, but most of the time I find that it's actually because the deck is not cut straight, and that just makes it shuffle all weird and wonky. So that shuffles beautifully. Let's lay down a few cards so we can just see what they look like, being all free from their borders now. And I think they are just absolutely beautiful. So thank you so much for joining me for this mod with me. I would love to know if you have this deck and what your thoughts are on it, so please feel free to share with me in the comments below. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this mod with me of the Oracle of the Dragonfae. I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.